It is officially that time of the year where like half the stuff I record is going to be from hotel rooms where you can see my bags and unkempt bed. But such as it is, I travel to do panels and talks quite a bit, and it's just the way it is. I need to do better about letting people know when stuff is happening so you can come see, and so I'll work on that. But I'm in New York. Did an event yesterday at the New York Historical, and now I am about to leave. But before I do, I wanted to comment real quick with a little more substance on, I think, the big political event of this week, which is simply the successful ouster of Viktor Orban from power in Hungary. The Hungarian people, after years, Orban was in power for 16 years. After years of hard work and perseverance, were able to assemble the kind of commanding electoral supermajority necessary to oust Orban and his party from power and win enough seats in the legislature to really begin to undo so much of Orban's twisting of the political system to keep himself in power. The opposition candidate, Peter Major, which I think I'm saying correctly, assembled a center-right coalition, admittedly, but a broad coalition of opponents, pro-European integration, supporters of democracy, to oust Orban, and it really is a remarkable success. And huge congratulations to the Hungarian people for doing it. I think that this election does have a few lessons for Americans. But before we get to those, I want to talk about some of the significance of this, beyond just the significance of removing from power like a real deal autocrat, a real deal autocrat in a European country. The first, and this is more of a response to some commentary sense, is that yes, Orban's Hungary, authoritarian country. It absolutely is. You may ask yourself, well, how can it be authoritarian if you can remove people through elections? I will note for you, first of all, that we have plenty of examples of uncontested, we all agree these are authoritarian countries or authoritarian regimes that had regular elections. Elections were regular in the Jim Crow South. And it was theoretically possible, right, to remove Jim Crow politicians from power through elections. That's in part why Jim Crow politicians did everything they could to reduce voter participation, to put hard barriers to being able to participate in the political system, not just for blacks, but also for whites who might not be on board with the entire Jim Crow program, specifically the Jim Crow economic program of gross exploitation of labor. Apartheid South Africa had elections, regular elections, and theoretically, again, it was possible to remove them, remove the apartheid regime through electoral means. But the apartheid regime, like the Jim Crow South, like Orban's Hungary, relied on malapportionment, relied on gerrymandering, relied on hard barriers to keep itself in power. And then we can look at authoritarian regimes in Chile under Pinochet. Again, we all agree this was authoritarianism removed through elections. So the idea that the ability of Hungarians to remove Orban through elections therefore proves that Orban's Hungary wasn't authoritarian, in addition to being a literal example of begging the question, right, assuming your conclusion in your premise, just doesn't fit with what we know about authoritarian regimes. They have been removed by elections. There is an argument that, oh, of course, in every democracy, winning parties try to entrench themselves by bending the rules and such. And this, too, is a canard. In mature, stable, healthy democracies, do winning political parties attempt to hold on to power through patronage? Yes. Do they try to hold on to power through finding ways to strengthen their electoral coalition by delivering benefits to the people who support them? Yes. Do they even, here in the United States, for example, engage in tinkering on the margins, right, with the boundaries of districts and so on and so forth? Yes. But do they outright try to disenfranchise their opponents? No. Do they leverage the weight of electoral laws against their opponents and let things for their supporters slide by? No. They don't do these things. These things represent backsliding from democracy. They are not a normal part of democratic contestation, and the assertion that they are, again, is a canard. It's coming from people who are ideologically sympathetic to Orban, who might have even supported Orban's regime, might have even taken money from Orban's regime. Which gets to my next point, and who are looking for ways to minimize both the significance of the election and minimize the authoritarianism of Orban. And this, the second point I want to make, is that the one big reason why Orban's defeat is so significant is that Orban was this nexus connecting the international far right, the fascism international. He funneled money and support to far right groups and individuals in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in France, in Italy, often money coming from Putin's Russia. He convened those individuals and their parties and so on and so forth in Hungary so they could meet each other and share ideas and strategies. The Conservative Political Action Committee here in the United States has held multiple of its annual conferences in Hungary, and according to the new opposition leader, Orban was directly funneling money to it. And in turn, reactionaries here drew inspiration from Orban. Ron DeSantis' attack on higher education, on LGBTQ people, on critical race theory in Florida, directly inspired by Orban. Really an attempt to make Florida like Hungary on the Atlantic. The Trump administration's similar assaults on DEI, on gender ideology, on higher education, on universities, on federal research, on everything that could be an independent base of knowledge and resistance to the administration, directly inspired by Orban. Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, who destroyed USAID, among other agencies, inspired by Orban, right? There are real connections here. And so removing Orban from power is really removing a critical node in the dissemination of ideas and money and influence between the international far right. It's significant. Now, here are some things that might be useful for us in the United States. The first is that the opposition campaign, although it did focus quite a bit on what we might call affordability, on cost of living, on making life better for ordinary Hungarians, also focused a great deal on corruption and connected the two, connected the gross and rampant corruption of the Orban regime. And the Orban regime, more or less, is just a sophisticated ideological gloss over naked theft from the Hungarian people funneled to Orban's friends and cronies and supporters. Connected that corruption to the poor economic prospects for ordinary Hungarians. And that's a strategy I think needs to be replicated here. The Trump regime is extraordinarily corrupt. They are raking billions of dollars. They're betting on outcomes. They're betting on decisions of life and death to make money. This corruption is egregious, and it's a simple, really political task to connect that corruption to the way that so many Americans are feeling left behind. That the corruption, the impunity is the reason why our economy is so tilted against ordinary people. I think that's a winning message. And people just hate corruption. They really hate it. And this administration is, again, extraordinarily corrupt. It will, of course, rely on Democrats to also crack down on corruption in their own ranks, ban stock trading, right? That kind of thing among lawmakers. But I think that's worthwhile, and I think this is a winning message against the administration. Part of the corruption messaging in Hungary was also the promise of accountability, the promise of bringing to justice people who have committed crimes. And that is, I think, an especially critical message to have here in the United States. No more will the people in power be able to commit crimes, to steal, to violate a sacred trust, to violate the public trust without consequences. And if that means actively prosecuting people, if that means Congress using its subpoena power and also its power to arrest people who refuse subpoenas, that's what it means. This might seem like escalation, might seem like norm breaking, but I think this is precisely the kind of norm breaking necessary to bring the system back into equilibrium. No more escaping consequences because you happen to have a little money in your pocket or know the right people. Final thought here is that, and this is actually a lesson from Orban, which is that the strength of Orban's regime came in part from its international connections, from the attempt to build an international community of right wingers, of fascists. This used to be very much a part of the American left, right? Of building connections internationally. This is something to emulate for those of us on the broad American left. When I say broad left, I'm not getting into stupid debates over liberals and leftists. I'm talking about the broad community of Americans who are left of center, from socialists to social democrats and left liberals like myself to ordinary liberals, building connections between our counterparts around the world, not just in Europe, but in South America as well, trading ideas, lessons, strategies for pushing back against the far right. I think this is going to be a necessary part of both responding to the far right in our own country and helping push back the far right worldwide. So yeah, Hungary, very significant. Not because Hungary is a great, important country, no offense to Hungarians, but it's a pretty modest, small place in the middle of Europe. Part of why it was so odd that American conservatives became obsessed with it, but that's a different video. But Orban's defeat is significant nonetheless, and there's quite a bit we can take from it. I gotta head out of this hotel room. My stay is almost up. I'll see you guys later.